What is up, everybody? Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Free Fortitude podcast. I'm your host, Uriah Stett, and I have the lovely pleasure of introducing a lovely lady. Her name is Juli, and she's my girlfriend. Juli, tell the people about yourself.
Well, hello, people. My name is Juli Forde. I'm the owner and creator of Wild and Wood Creations. I would classify myself as a wood artist, not like a woodworker, but my bread and butter would be I like to work with people with closing gifts and other cool concepts that evoke emotion within their homes.
It's epic stuff, people. You should check out her Shopify. It's linked below. Awesome work. Awesome work. And I get to see it every day. She's made a couple cool pieces for me, for sure. Before we jump into today's podcast, I want to give a huge shout out to 6035 Real Estate. They are letting us use this lovely facility here to film the podcast today. So thank you guys so much. If you guys need real estate at all, feel free and hit them up. You have been with me on the journey from the beginning. Hasn't been that long, but one of the questions that I wanted to tee you up for is, what does fortitude mean to you?
It's so interesting. I feel like watching you create this from the beginning and the concepts from 6 months ago. And when we started talking about like, what's your favorite words and all this and that was brought up. And I've seen how it's played out in your life in sharing stories. And for me, the biggest thing would be like the word means resilience. It means pushing through. It means honoring yourself, what's important to you, and having the strength, finding the strength to do so.
It's good. Yeah. That's pretty accurate in your life, I would say, huh? So tell me a little bit, how is it working in the real estate space? Like, I mean, I've been in the real estate space too, helping people with social media and stuff, but for your particular business, what's that look like?
I kind of had a shoe-in real estate. I spent 3 years in the title industry. So it allowed, I ran my business on the side for that time, just as a fun hobby. And when I was presented the opportunity to transition into corporate or take my business full time, I gave myself 2 months in order to expand and see if this was the right place for me, if I could handle running a business, if it made sense being a single mom of 3 kids. And I had some really cool creative ideas that I wanted to transition to. So I was like, I'm just going to freaking do it and see what happens.
And you did it.
And so I did it. And the support of the community and the relationships that I already had blew my mind. And it was literally like, I gave myself 2 months. And I was like, and if it doesn't work, send the resumes back out, get back into corporate. But I had so much support from my community. And the reason why I really enjoy working in real estate, there's a couple different things. I love hearing the stories about, being a single mom. There's a lot of compassion when I hear another single mom that's worked 2 jobs and created, her goal was to put her babies in a home, and that's what they did. When I hear, family, like all of the heartfeltness of that goes into real estate too. It's closing deals, it's transactions, it's contracts, it's inspections. There's all of this, but then there's also like the human aspect of real estate. And there was a huge thing for me as to why I wanted to stay in the industry. So my network made sense. The stories and the humans involved in it made sense. And also being a creative person, I really love having creative freedom. So it made sense to flow into that space, still having creative expression in my work, keeping a roof over the head, the head for the boys.
Yeah. Good job. I mean, you freaking did it. There's not too many that can say that they make it their first year, right. But you made it your first year. But it's not always rainbows and sunshine, right?
Not even close.
So tell me a little bit about that. What are some challenges that you face, maybe even just from the mother perspective and balancing work and everything to the business? What are some challenges that you did face?
I can identify a few major challenges that I had from the beginning. I feel as though I scaled extremely quickly because I had all this support. I didn't know what I could personally handle. I'm not a drop ship where I send stuff off. I'm hand creating every single thing. I'm creating concepts, designs, ideas. Therefore, and then I'm still business developing and I'm still doing all these other things and accounting and all the hats that business owners wear in addition to the creations aspect.
You don't just like cut wood and like that's it and put it together and
I'm like la-di-da-di-da. No, don't la-di-da-di-da.
Okay.
And so I would say because I had so much support initially, I scaled too quickly, but I didn't have the sphere of entrepreneurs to guide me or mentors in my life to guide me to be like, dude, you need to give this to somebody else. You need to delegate this responsibility. And I was like, I had this idea that I could just do it all. And who needs freaking sleep? Like, who needs to take care of themselves?
I do.
Yeah, he does. Me too. Yeah. And that's what I learned. Like I was waking up at 3 a.m. to create so then I could and then take my kids to school, then come home and create for a longer period of time and then pick them up from school. And then I'd keep my machine working while we had dinner. It was literally like, my world started revolving around my work instead of creating space to live within the work that I do.
What does that balance look like? I mean, obviously it looked a certain way when you first started.
Right.
But
and I was hungry to start it. Yeah. I was hungry to want to succeed. I was hungry to want to freaking blow it out of the water, not knowing what I truly had capacity for. And I would say, not only did I not get orders fulfilled properly because I didn't have the right systems in place, I also then was burnt out. I was emotionally drained. Like, burnout is real for entrepreneurs.
For sure.
And so, and I feel like if I had a sphere, yes, real estate, I had friends in real estate that are entrepreneurs, but I just didn't have mentorships in place.
Yeah.
And I would say that's a huge thing. People thinking about starting businesses, making sure that you have your circles, not just like, we need to have business coming in, right? But we also need to have people guiding us and telling us the direction in real life that are going to tell you the tough conversations.
Yeah. The
things that you need to hear with love.
Yeah. So how do you manage that balance? How do you, as a single mom, I mean, I know as a single dad, like, I don't do the best job ever at balancing work-life balance, but I try to make, time to be with my girls, to care for them and hang out with you and stuff like that. So speak to that a little bit. What does it look like to balance stuff in your business?
First of all, I feel like balance, it's a constant act of, right? Like, you're always going to be reassessing based off of current things that are happening in your life. So you'll have it figured out and then let's throw a wrench in it and it'll, we're off balance, right? And so the idea of balancing versus balance, I think, is important to keep in mind because it's a flowing thing.
Yeah.
I think creating systems in place of what you actually have capacity for and what's important to you, like deciding that there's going to be seasons, weeks, days, and how long do you want those to be where you're like, I am truly focused on my business, or I'm making capacity for myself, or I'm making capacity for people in my life. I mean, in our dynamic, we've even felt that where it's like, for the next 3 days, I'm going to be very deep in on these projects that I'm working on, and having a partner and a family and a support system that understands that is super important. And also working with the right clients. And I would say through all of this, part of the reason why entrepreneurship made sense for me was because I have the boys 90% of the time.
Yeah.
And I have to show up. I'm the person doing every pickup, every drop off, managing sick days, managing snow days, managing everything for 3 other humans, including myself. Therefore, and I had to find, like, in what I'm doing, it allowed me to create that space. And I learned very quickly that if I was ever delayed in something and people had issues, then those just aren't my people.
Yeah.
And I had to learn, like, as hard as it was. And I've grown a lot in terms of like getting tough news of people being like, this was great, except for and that's been a common feedback, was like, everything was great. I just needed it 2 days earlier. Right. But I'm like, and then I've talked them through what my process is, what my systems are, because now I've understood what they are. So I would say, like, because I scaled so quickly,
you didn't have that communication.
I didn't. And I didn't know. And I'm like a yes person in that moment. I have the energy to be like, yeah, I'm going to stay up. I'm going to do this. I'm pumped for it. And then there's an emotional outburst with 2 of my children. And then I'm like totally shifted and off balance. And then I'm drained. So I don't have capacity like I did when I said, yes, I could turn this in 48 hours.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's a matter of now I can say, this is what my system is. This is what my process is. And I really assess now, because it's so important, I can really assess now, do I have capacity? And what does that look like?
Yeah.
Do I have the material for the product? Do I have like the emotional space? What's the kids' schedule? What's coming up in my life? Like, where am I at emotionally to be able to handle it?
Yeah. So speak to that, mental health in the entrepreneurial space, right? Like, that's important. Mental health is a big topic today. And so there's tons of people going into business for themselves. I love to see it. But at the same time, like, what about that? What about our mental?
Yeah. I would say I'm learning as I go, but I at least know enough about myself and have self-actualization that I can be like, this is what I need today. And that's part of honoring myself. And before I went into entrepreneurship, I did business development for a title company. Therefore, and I have always felt during that, the better I show up, the better relationships I had with my clients, the better I could show up for client meetings and focus on being present with them. The better I took care of myself, the better I produced in my business. Yeah. And so I think that speaks volumes to entrepreneurship. It's a matter of, when we're in the trenches, what choices are we going to make? How are we going to check in with ourselves? And I would say, like, I didn't always prioritize myself. Like, I would say I almost never prioritized myself until I got to a point where I'm like, I don't have a choice. And I will learn to say no. I'd rather disappoint somebody else than to put myself in a bad mental space. And there's moments where, like, I'm still learning, right? It's balancing.
Right, for sure.
So I still don't have a full grasp on it.
I don't think anybody does. There's no blueprint for this.
No, I would agree with that. Yeah. But I think it's a matter of being intentional with moments that you do have with yourself, and whether that's a morning routine or an evening routine, and everyone does it differently depending on how structured you are. I'm not a very structured person, which is why art makes sense for me. I'm like, I'm going to create this today. But I also have awareness of, like, I need that space to flow. I need that space to create freely. That's now part of my unstructured structure, where I'm like, I'm going to give myself capacity, because I've learned that when I'm not putting my creative energy into the right things, I'm not really putting my creative energy into the things that I need to get done. So it's a matter of finding out what makes sense for checking in with myself. Where's my creative energy? Where's my mind? Where's my heart? And then creating a plan from there.
What about entrepreneurial flow? Like, I think everybody as an entrepreneur wants to buckle down and get some stuff done. Yeah. And sometimes it's forced and it just doesn't work out, but then you find this flow, right? Yeah. What's that look like for you?
It's a good question. I've learned through entrepreneurship, I'm neurodivergent. And so I have ADHD. It shows up pretty big in moments. Showing up big would be like, there's resistance to getting something checked off my to-do list. That would be like, I'm scattered and I have 10 projects going on at once, and I could finish 9 of them in 30 minutes if I made that a priority, right? And so I think that having a healthy workspace is super important. Knowing what works for you, like what works for you. Do you operate best in the mornings? Do you operate, like, I'm a morning person, he's a night person. And we have learned this when we are deep in our spaces, that, like, I'm going to sleep at 9 o'clock to wake up at, 5 or whenever. And then that's okay for us. And then we find ways to create space later on for us because we can respect that we both we're in our flow, right? And honoring how each other work the best.
Yeah.
So I could say I work really great in the mornings. I also wake up feeling accomplished, enjoying a cup of coffee before the kids wake up. That has been a safe place for me. I have found that. So entrepreneurial flow, I think, is totally about knowing how you operate and what serves you to do the best for your business and for yourself.
That's good. But what's something that is pretty much across the board? Like, this is something that I would have done differently, or this is something that I really think you should implement forefront because it helped me in this way?
Oh, that's a really good question. I think you have to have the passion. You don't get in it for the money. You have to have the passion. You have to have the desire. There has to be heart and emotion but also logic. It has to make sense, but it can't just be for bullshit.
Facts. Yeah.
What value are you adding? What are you bringing to the world? Is this part of your legacy? Is this part of the things that actually fucking matter?
Yeah.
When you're pushed against a wall, when it's time for fortitude, how are you going to show up?
How are you paying the bills?
Right.
Yeah.
Because it's inevitably, it's going to happen.
Yeah.
So when you're pushed against the wall, how are you going to respond?
Right.
Are you going to fight for your business? Are you going to fight for yourself? Are you going to fight for what your vision is? Or are you just going to fold? And if you don't have the heart and the desire to figure it out or call up a buddy to help you brainstorm or to I can tell you, I have friends in the creation space that have guided me and mentored me when I'm I need to somehow make $500 in the next 3 days to make my rent.
Yeah.
And literally, and I'm very thankful for this one in particular. And she's part of the reason why I flowed into what I did, why I took it full time. Because she was just fears aside, what do you want to do?
Yeah.
And she was 8 years ahead of being a creator as an entrepreneur, raising single kids. And she in particular was if you really want to do it, you have the creative space to do it, you have this opportunity.
Yeah.
Take it. I wanted to take my business full time after I had my third kid. So 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And I had people in my life saying, no, you need steady income. You need this. Why? You just make a little wood sign. You just make signs. That's not a career.
How's your little business going?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. That's not a career.
Yeah.
And I let that sit in me and dictate. And on a level, and I think you have to look at the nudges in your life.
For sure.
Because I can say at that point, I really wasn't ready for that. I also didn't have the relationships in the real estate world where it probably would have flopped.
Yeah.
Right. But so I'm thankful that I then transitioned into a corporate job and did this, built relationships, built a type of network.
How important are those relationships?
That's partially why we're here today.
That's it. How important is it to nourish those relationships and stay connected to your people? And
relationships are everything, but it's also understanding that it's because we're humans first. And that's what I've identified. People I enjoy working with the most put the humanity first. Because there's humanness in the whole thing. I don't want to just be a sign slanger, right? That's great, right? However, that's not what I want to identify as. Hence why I like to bring emotion into it. I want to hear the stories. I want to do this. I want to do that. Yeah. If I don't have that relationship, it's just, hey, I need a closing gift in 10 days.
Yeah.
Cool. When they're oh, I want to tell you about my client so we can make sure it's perfect for them.
Right.
Because I also know that they're relational driven too.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think knowing how to field those questions with your people is super important as an entrepreneur, wherever your client is.
Yeah. Tell me about a time you just faced a hard client. It's just how can I even work with this person anymore?
I've definitely had a few of those where I'm it didn't, at the end of the day, I could sit and say I didn't feel good after that for whatever reason.
Yeah.
It's maybe they just made it challenging with invoices being paid. Maybe they made it challenging because we didn't see the same vision or something along those lines, or they didn't like the product, which is...
How do you navigate that though? When you're in that and you're feeling that like offness, right? With a client, how do you navigate like...
So I try to slow down the conversation and ask questions. I want to understand what it is and where we can actually solve problems. There's been times where I made a sign. I don't speak Spanish fluently. I can like order drinks and ask and food and ask where the restroom is and the library. And so I was making a sign in Spanish and I spelled it incorrectly. Human, like something that I could have sworn like I double checked, and like this person was so gracious and like, just remake it. And I remade it and I revamped the design a little bit. And like, she was like, this is perfect. And I think that's a matter of those people make it so much better to work with them. And you want to do right by your customer. You want to do the right thing, but it's when you're met with hostility or frustration,
resentment.
And that's when I'm like, they're not my people. And I have to be mindful of that. Like, as much as I want the business, at what expense?
Talk about the challenge that you were faced with, like doing business out of the house.
I went through my divorce and I moved into a house in the same neighborhood, keeping it easy for the kids. They decided to sell the house and I wasn't in a position to buy it. So we had to move again. And I was like, told myself, I was like, I'm just going to move into an apartment, keep it easy. It'll be fine. I wasn't doing this full time at the time. So I moved into a 2-bedroom apartment with me and my 3 boys. And I had my laser, but I didn't use it a whole lot at first. And so then when I decided to transition into this full time, I had to find a place to work, and it became my kitchen table. Just what it is, in this small little space, took over the whole kitchen table, got a cupboard, like did the best I had with the circumstance, like all the little Tupperware like containers to organize the stuff that I could. I would say like your space is so important because it creates, I think it's a huge formula. So of success, and especially being a product driven business. And so it sucked. But there was no better solution at the time. So I just had to like embrace the stuff.
Well, thanks so much for coming on this podcast.
My pleasure.
And hanging out with your boyfriend.
Just a day in the life.
Speaking of, she makes these hats. They're awesome. She's the one. How do people find your products and how do they connect with you?
Yeah, so there's a couple avenues to pursue. So Shopify is a big one, or Instagram and Facebook. I'm pretty active on both of those. I do custom pieces, or I love brainstorming with people if they have a cool concept or you saw something on Pinterest or whatever, on a reel that you want to send me. So go ahead and you can message me on either of those platforms in order to make cool shit happen for your home.
Sweet. And as always, remember, forge on and stand strong.